My name is Carey Campbell with Next Ensemble, and welcome to the first in a series that we're calling Force Majeure, Music During Times of Crisis. We're going to be exploring different ways that music and musicians have responded to times of crisis, either with music that is optimistic and uplifting or music that tells an alternative narrative. Our first episode, H1N1, 1919. Now, of course, the big news around this time was World War I, and it had just come to completion. For many, particularly those returning home from World War I victorious, the mood was optimistic. The mood was high. Even for those being sent over when the war began, the arts provided a kind of morale boost, such as this song.
Singing the dainty air, goodbye Broadway, hello France, we're 10 million strong. Goodbye sweethearts, wives and mothers, it won't take us long. Don't you worry while we're there, sit for you, we're fighting too. So goodbye Broadway, hello France, we're going to swear our debt to you.
Americans were convinced that it was their duty to help support the war however they could, whether by going into the trenches or helping out economically, or just simply doing their part. The mood with regard to the war, as I said, was optimistic. Much of the musical responses, both to the war when it was going on and after, were quite wide-ranging. We have, of course, the rather hyper-objective music coming out of German classical styles immediately after the war. We have this strange fascination in France with American jazz. Josephine Baker in particular becoming a giant celebrity in France after the war, but also composers like Ravel and Majeure adopting American jazz into their works. In terms of American popular music, it was overrun by these kinds of messages of optimism for the war and energy about going to war. From 1917, we get George M. Cohan's Over There, which was used both during World War I and World War II as a sort of rallying cry.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling, you and me, every son of liberty. Hurry right away, don't delay, go today. Make your daddy glad to have had such a lad. And tell your sweetheart not to pine, to be proud her boys in line. Over there, over there, send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming, the drums coming everywhere, so prepare.
But there was another story happening in 1917, 18, 19, 1920. The 1918 flu pandemic, popularly but unfairly known as the Spanish flu, infected about 500 million people. That's a quarter of the world's population at that time. The pandemic lasted roughly from January 1918 to December 1920, and its death toll was massive. We had during this pandemic public places being ordered to be closed. Schools, churches, theaters, all closing. People were on ventilators. People were wearing masks in the street. This pandemic happened during World War I, and the conditions of war certainly contributed to its spread. Reports of the epidemic in Spain flowed freely because Spain was a neutral country, but early reports of illnesses and mortality were censored in many countries involved in the war, including the US. This gave the impression early on that Spain had a disproportionate number of cases, hence the name Spanish flu. War always inspires music. Sometimes a narrative of hopefulness and victoriousness, sometimes with tragic narratives. Tales of pandemics, however, tend toward the tragic, which made it a ripe subject for American blues musicians. We get from an artist named S.C. Jenkins, the 1919 Influenza Blues. I'll play a little bit of it for you here, but it was 1919, men and women were dying with the stuff that the doctor called the flu. North and south, east and west, it can be seen, it killed the rich, killed the poor.
It was in 1919, yes, men and women was dying with that stuff which the doctors call the flu. People died everywhere. Death went creeping through the air, and the groans of the rich sure was sad. But it was God's own mighty plan. He is judging this old land. North and south, east and west can be seen. He killed rich and poor, and he's going to kill some more. If you don't turn away from your shame.
Tragedy was, of course, a subject that comes up a lot in American blues. And American blues musicians went straight for this narrative of tragedy with regard to the pandemic. While the war was going on and immediately after the war, while American optimism and confidence is high, we get artists like Blind Willie Johnson writing a song about the pandemic of 1918, 1919. In the song, Jesus is Coming Soon.
Well, we done told I got done warned, Jesus coming soon. We done told I got done warned, Jesus coming soon. And the year of 1918, God sent a mighty disease. It killed many 1,000 on and on the sea. Wait until I got done warned, Jesus coming soon. Wait until I got done warned, Jesus coming soon. people was sick everywhere. There was never a didn't I floated through the air. When I thought I got done with Jesus coming soon. When I thought I got done with Jesus coming soon.
By no means am I suggesting that the current crisis, the current pandemic, is exactly the same as the Spanish flu. A quick check of articles in circulation right now talk about the various ways that the Spanish flu and the coronavirus are different. However, we see some similar responses, and in particular, we may begin to see narratives of despair. And I am, as a musicologist, I'm actually very interested to see sort of how we respond to this artistically in the coming months. Throughout the series, we're going to be looking at music during times of crises and thinking about ways in which music and musicians have lived through, responded, commented upon various crises. Thank you for joining us today. We'll include links so that you can hear the complete songs by Essie Jenkins and Blind Willie Johnson that I gave you a taste of in the video. Thank you, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.